rewatch it and see if it gets funnier. So I've been well known for teaching now all over the world. I've been training private clients from Australia to Alaska. And if there's one thing that gets me upset more than anything, it's when people look down at their iPad or their GPS unit when they taxi. And I like to say, I'm the world's greatest flight instructor because I've made all the mistakes already. And I'll just keep getting greater, I'm sure. So when I say I'm the greatest flight instructor, it doesn't mean I'm the smartest human being on the planet. It just means I've already made the mistakes so you don't have to. Classic example. I got back from an international trip. I was time zone challenged and fatigued. Had to get up early the next morning. My wife is beautiful, smart, actually much smarter than me, but is not known for her ability to be a morning person. I'm dragging her half asleep to the airport. My mother is texting me, "Where are you? The party can't start without you." I have to fly from North Texas, near Dallas Fort Worth, up to Tulsa for my aunt and uncle's 70th wedding anniversary. Well, clearly the party's going to start whether I come there or not, but thanks for the extra pressure, Mom. So let's review. I am fatigued, under family pressure, and I feel like I have to go. Well, right then I should have just stopped. But, being the world's greatest flight instructor, meaning I need to make more mistakes so you all don't have to, I continued with it. I programmed my Avidyne flight management system and, of course, my ForeFlight way before I got in the airplane. It was all set up and done. I had a very expensive new iPad mount, and as I started taxiing, the iPad mount failed, and I immediately dove to protect my very expensive iPad and taxied straight into a giant yellow pole directly above the fuel tanks. So while I believe in having the most expensive iPad at all times, I pay monthly data, I have the highest level of money you can give for flight, it doesn't come close to my $3,000 wing repair. Now, Avemco Insurance was very sweet about it, and I did not file the claim. I just wrote the check. It wasn't fair to Avemco to pay for my mistake. When I tell you, please don't look down at your iPad while you're taxing, it's because I've already done this one. You don't have to. Now, it is very important that you set up your ForeFlight account correctly. To file all flight plans IFR must, of course, be ICAO, and it's been that way for a while. But I'm going to show you how I set up my ICAO equipment, and this is what I have installed in my very nice 1966 top-of-the-line 206. Other world's greatest flight management systems. Avidyne makes flight management systems. Garmin makes GPS systems. What's the difference? Well, flight management system does 20 things an hour for me that I would have to manually do on a GPS system. That's why I went with Avidyne. It's not that Garmin's not great. I just believe in workload reduction. So I have an Avidyne 550 and a 440. Both are, of course, WAAS FMS systems. I have an Avidyne remote transponder with ADS-B out, and I have an Avidyne ADS-B in system. Now, other equipment in my airplane, but not required for the ICAO setup, is I have the Genesis S-Tech 55X autopilot. That's the best one available for my airplane. I have an Aspen PFD, and I have Aero LEDs. The Aero LEDs certainly important so I don't get hit. Let me show you how to set that all up in ForeFlight. Now, of course, your plane will be different. So I'm going to click on 49 or 401 Foxtrot. I go to Aircraft, touch it, scroll up from the bottom. Of course, I'm Slant Gulf, that's the FAA equipment, but I need to set up the ICAO equipment. So I have WAAS, which is SBAS in ICAO speak. Of course, I have GPS, which is GNSS. A lot of people mark ILS. You don't have to. A lot of people mark VOR. You don't have to. You are PBN approved with a WAAS GPS, and Sierra covers the VOR, the very high frequency, and the ILS. So again, you don't have to mark that very high frequency radio. And I have the ability to do 8.33 even though we don't use it in the US. Under surveillance, I have Bravo 1 and extended Squitter, and then I have ADS-B in, which I will click down here at the bottom. Now, ICAO PBN, anything with GNSS I need to check. The Avidyne is certified for RNP 10 Alpha 1, but you need a letter of authorization to use it, so I don't have that. So pretty much select anything with a 2. Bravo 2, Charlie 2, Delta 2, Oscar 2, Sierra 1, because I can do RNP approaches. RNP meaning 1.0, not 0.3 RF. How do I get the code? Well, go to FAA.gov, put in my tail number, click go, and I'm looking for the mode S code base 16. It starts with an alpha 6.2. That's my mode S code. Obviously, you wouldn't put this in for your airplane. I'm going to copy that, switch back to ForeFlight, paste that. That is my code that it needs to be in. Now under navigation, I'm going to put WAAS, which is abbreviated Space-Based Augmentation System, SBAS. Performance is alpha. That's your circling category. My tail number. And the ADS-B in-out system I have, which happens to be for the Avidyne stuff, 282 Bravo space 260 Bravo. Now I'm set up, so when I file ICAO flight plans, I can get RNAV-based SIDS and stars, which require RNP, Required Navigation Performance. In my extended ForeFlight series and extended IFR series, I explain the differences between RNP levels. You are not RNP 0.3 RF, you are RNP 1.0. You need to include that, otherwise you'll not get the RNAV SIDS and stars. So I want to show you how I mark up a chart. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to the top and pick my home airport, KLUD. I'm going to pick a nice color highlighter. I don't know, I like Gary Pink for some reason. Remember, GPS is Gary's Pink Source. Highlight the name of the airport, the city, and the RNAV GPS 17. I need to have the AWOS before I can accept an approach clearance from regional, and then I'm kicking over to common traffic. My final approach course is B16 tree. The minimum altitude at my final approach fix is 3,400. The decision altitude is 1297. Then I'm going to look at all those notes and realize that only one of those notes really apply to me, and that is pilot controlled lighting on 122.8. I'm going to highlight my 2 initial approach fixes, Zoom Key and Buoy, and my intermediate fix, Wiser. Again, if you're not clear on the difference between initial and approach fix and intermediate fix, my IFR series will fix that for you. I put a giant T over my final approach fix because that's what I was taught. Time, turn, twist, throttle, talk, touch. Now I do all approaches in the 206 at 100 knots. Of course, in the descent, you speed up a little bit. So I realize my vertical speed is going to be somewhere between 531 and 637. And I'm going to highlight the published decision altitude of 1297 again. Now I'm color coded. I'm always prepared to go mist, and green to me means go. So I always highlight the mist approach in green. Hergo, my inbound course, is my mist approach hold point. My mist approach point, where I start the mist, is RW17. If I don't do it at the decision altitude, for any reason I don't get the vertical guidance, I'm going to climb to 2600 Hergo and hold, and if I get lost, go to 4000. Now I need to put in all those numbers so I don't have to look real hard. Anywhere outside of Wiser, I should be at 3,400 feet. Passing Wiser outside of Tinley, I should be at or above 3,400 feet. Now, I can make that text a little bit smaller just by touching Inspector and changing the font size. And then I'm going to make my decision altitude. Now, my published decision altitude is 1297. I don't believe in going down to published minimums. I always believe in a slightly higher personal minimum. So I'm going to make my decision altitude 1400, but I'll capitalize it so it stands out a little bit better. Then I'm going to put the missed approach instructions in. Again, missed approach, go means green to me. So after passing the RW17 or after, getting to my decision altitude, I'm going to climb to 2600. And then I need to figure out how I'm going to enter the hold. So it looks like a teardrop. You could do a parallel. I'm just not a big fan of parallels, and it looks more like a right turn. I want to do 25 degrees, so let's call it 190. Just need to slide my text box over a little bit. And I'm even going to draw in the direction of my entry. Now look, if the autopilot is flying in GPS steering, I don't care how it does the hold. This is how I would do the hold if my autopilot was broken or I needed to hand fly it for any reason. Now, the reason I do all this is because I don't have to look at the bottom of the profile anymore. I can just zoom in and simply look at the numbers on the map view. So the distinction here is this. A lot of people say the biggest killer of pilots is low and slow, the stall spin. I don't think that's true. A lot of people say, oh, the biggest killer of pilots is VFR into IMC. I don't think that's true either. I think the biggest killer of pilots is something called decision fatigue. Okay, and we have many medical studies to back this up. But what we know is this. The longer you make decisions, and the more decisions you have to make, the worse those decisions will get. So what I'm telling you all is this. The decision to do a circling approach at the end of a long flight while looking down at 8 different points on a non-marked up chart increases your chance of being a fatality. The biggest difference between a professional pilot and an amateur, and I'm going to say this a couple times, is if you do all the work before you get in the airplane, you'll reduce your fatigue and you'll reduce the amount of decisions you have to make. That's why I believe in marking up the chart. So now let's look at a simple way of doing a flight plan. So let's go from, Decatur up to Oklahoma City. So what I do is I simply put it all in at the top. KLUD, GPS Direct, KOKC. I want to go at 6,000 feet. And I want to leave in 90 minutes. Return. When I hit the enter key, it all pops up in my flight plan. Now, a common error is to put in departures and arrivals and then decide, well, am I going east or west? Now, the east-west rules don't matter on where you're flying. They matter on a straight line. You can see this Oklahoma City is actually just slightly west. So we need to be an even altitude, which I am. I'll get rid of my plate. Now I need to put in departures and arrivals. You should always go GPS Direct, and I'm going to pick my alternate as Ardmore now. I like picking my alternate to be a minimum of 50 miles before I get to my destination. Again, if you stop before you get into bad weather, you have a higher survival rate. So I just know that every single time I leave Decatur, the default departure is the southbound departure. And it looks like that's going to work for me today. And then I need to pick my landing runway at Oklahoma City. So you can see how runway 17, my southbound departure, is going to work out. And if I check the weather at Oklahoma City, the current METAR is 130 at 9 knots. The TAF says it's going to be 130 at 7 to 150 to 140, so pretty much favoring runway 13. So if I insert before Oklahoma City the departure I'm going to get, which is the Fuzz 360 radial to Blico, none of the published departure procedures would work. They're always going to give me intercept the Fuzz 360 radial to Blico. Not going to Fuzz, I'm going to be told to intercept the Fuzz 360 radial to Blico. Now I need to pick an arrival procedure. You should always use departures and arrivals if they're available. This one looks like the Tisdale 3 is my best. And I'm going to start at Fidget. And the runway I'm going to pick using runway 13, the closest runway to that would be 17 right. That's how I pick my arrivals if your particular runway is not listed. And you can see 13 and 17 right are the two closest runways. And by the way, that keeps me closest to my FBO that I want, which is AAR. So that's basically how I do my flight plan. If I zoom back out, you see that dash blue line from Misaki over to Oklahoma City. That's called a manual termination, which I'll get later. And one of the biggest advantages to paying for a Jeppesen subscription is you can actually overlay the Jeppesen plate on your moving map. And I'll show you again later how to do that. So you see the little green splotches? That's just radar. But remember I was talking about that manual termination, that dashed blue line? That's that radar vector to final. We don't know when, so Oklahoma City approach is going to do that. So let's send it over to the flights, add my alternate of Ardmore, and get a weather brief. Now, it is pretty important that I don't use the route advisor because the route advisor is not an advisor. It's just a history of what other people have done. Both of those would be really inefficient, take me out of my way, and waste gas. So the route advisor is simply a history of what other people have done. I never use it. I pick my own routes. So we'll file and get a weather brief. I'm sorry, we're going to get a weather brief, then file. And while it's thinking about it, I want you to do things in the correct manner. You can't file a flight plan, then get a weather brief. I mean, you can, but how do you know if your alternate airport's even open? How do you know if you need an alternate? And then you have to change your flight plan. If you brief and then file, it is a much more logical order. Let's go through a weather brief. What we're going to do is we'll just start at the top, temporary flight restriction. You notice there's a little red circle to the right of my pink line. If I touch the map gets bigger, and that's where George Bush lives. So that's kind of a permanent TFR here. And you can scroll up from the bottom and read all the details. If I touch next IFR AirMets, that'll pop up to the next one. Same thing. Touch the map to make it bigger. Great. You'll notice that there's an AirMet Sierra at the top in yellow, and there's an AirMet Sierra below that in red. Red is active during our passing time if we leave on time. And the yellow alert at the top is active within 1 hour. So it may become active if we drag our feet and are a little late to depart. So the easiest way to read these for me is to simply scroll all the way up and hit show raw text. It's just easier for me to read the raw text. Okay? And this says it's valid on the 23rd until 2100 Zulu. And if you look all the way down at the bottoms, that's what I'm looking for. Ceiling below 1000, visibility below 3 statute miles, precipitation, BR baby rain, which is mist, and fog. And they continue beyond 21 Zulu, and they end somewhere between 00 Zulu and 03 Zulu. Let's look at the one that's current, and you can see it's just to the right of our main course, but we are flying through the edge. So we can go back. Same thing, it's just easier for me to show raw text at the bottom and read the same thing. Ceiling below 1000, visibility below 3 statute miles, precipitation, brume, which is the French word for mist or baby rain, and fog. Let's look at icing AirMets. This is what concerns me more than anything for GA. If I touch the map, it looks like we're flying into an area for icing air mets, not active during our proposed flight time. You see it says active near passing time, and it says 21:54 Zulu to 22:27 Zulu. That's the proposed flight time if we depart on time. Okay? So it's not active during our proposed time if we leave on time. Same thing, show raw text down at the bottom, and it's just easier to read at the bottom. The freezing level is from 10,000 to 17,000 across the area. So flying at 6,000, I shouldn't have any problems, but I'm always ready to descend and turn back. Turbulence high air mets. A lot of people don't look at the turbulence high air mets while I'm not going high. The problem is if there's a high air met and there are no low air mets, well, somewhere there's a boundary layer or a shear zone. So we can still get some turbulence. The top air met is inactive during our passing time. Same thing though, it may be active earlier or later. In this case, this one ends before we launch. The middle one is during, and the bottom one is during. And same thing, it's easier for me just to show the raw text. I look at the very bottom line, moderate turbulence between flight level 180 and flight level 400. Let's look at center weather advisories. And this is southeast of our proposed flight, but still a good thing to read. And basically it's just saying low IFR conditions in a box 35 miles wide. Ceilings at or below 500. So low IFR is typically below the approach minimas. That's why they put that out. Let's look at METARs. Now here's a really cool thing you need to know. Green is VFR airport, but it doesn't mean you can get there. Overcast at 4,000 feet with freezing rain and 3 miles visibility. Well, okay, wait a minute. Well, it might say, well, that's marginal, 3 miles visibility, but there's no way in or out. Don't make your decisions on color code. Make your decisions based on the weather. So let's look at Decatur. Decatur is showing currently IFR. It was taken on the 23rd day of the month at 1935 Zulu. The wind was 090 at 5 knots, 7 statute miles, broken 800, overcast 1300. Temperature and dew point are close at 19 and 17, and the altimeter is 3002. Now, it's an automated station, but you see that last T string? If you want to really impress your examiners, the temperature was actually 19.2, and the dew point was actually 16.6. It's temperature and dew point to 1 decimal point. Now, a METAR by itself is not really useful, but if you look at the clock symbol just to the left of the red dot, I can see if the weather is getting better, worse, or staying the same at Decatur by touching that clock symbol and then opening up the past several hours. If you looked way down at the bottom, the altimeter was 3008. Up at the very top, the altimeter is 3002. So the pressure is dropping here fairly consistently. I wouldn't say it's a rapid drop. The skies are improving a little bit because the day is warming up. As the day starts to get colder, then it's going to get colder. And the sky conditions should come back down and get worse. Let's look at Oklahoma City. Current is 130 at 9 knots, 2 miles with light drizzle, baby rain, brume, mist, overcast at 600, and the temperature and dew point's the same. Well, let's look at the last several hours, and you can see it's actually improving a little bit. So if I do leave in 90 minutes, I expect to get in. Everywhere else, pretty consistently IFR day. All right, let's look at PIREPs. Now, PIREPs are the most accurate weather you can possibly get, and I prefer the raw text over anything. So if you just scroll and hit raw text, it's easier for me to read. An unreliable airman, UA, over Alliance Airport at 1855 said during the climb, a 172, the sky was overcast starting at 1600. And you can go through many of these. I'm really looking just for icing and turbulence at this point. I've already read this entire weather briefing, so I'm going quickly. You should definitely slow down and take your time. Cloud coverage. This is what replaced the area forecast, or a component of replaced the area forecast. And if you simply tap it, this is your escape route in IMC. So if I'm climbing, and I'm going to be right about in the top left right there when I take off, the tops are 5,000. If I lose all electrical power, I've lost all radio communication, I've lost all navigation systems approved for the aircraft, do I really want to continue an hour and a half in IFR? No. I would probably use ForeFlight and escape to the left or go west to where VFR, non-towered airports, would make it safer for me to land. The FAA says you should continue your flight plan. I say you should just get to where it's safe. And we can look at the entire continental United States. Just remember, if you're taking a test and the examiner says, "What's that pink line?" Don't ever answer anything till you look at the bottom left. That's where legends always are. Okay, let's look at surface winds. Oh, the wind barbs are back. So in the top left, that is a 20 knot wind from the southwest, gusting to 30. Now in the top left is a 20 knot wind from the southwest, gusting to 25. And there's a light pink thunderstorm line, meaning that's a light thunderstorm. No, there's no such thing as light thunderstorms. The color is the number of thunderstorms in that area. There's no such thing as a light thunderstorm. All right, so if we look at North Texas to Oklahoma, don't see anything really bad. Same thing. There are isolated rain showers, or few rain showers is the way it's going to call. And again, the color of the rain is not how heavy it is. The color of the rain is the chance of it. Okay, so let's go back. And let's look at the central, because I'm going into Oklahoma. Same thing, touch the map, it gets bigger. Looks like there's some thunderstorms in northwest Oklahoma. Remember, not light thunderstorm, just isolated thunderstorms in those areas. Okay, so let's go back. And we can look at the entire continental United States. Let's see if there's anything interesting. Top left is a light snow shower. Top left is a light snow shower. Remember, the color is the chance of them coming. So remember, before you answer any question, always look at the legend. Okay, let's look at the TAFs. There's the nearest TAF for Decatur is Alliance, and it says it's going to be marginal VFR during that time period. I would like to come home tonight. So if we go up to the top line on the 24th at 0400, which would be 11 p.m. tonight in Dallas, the wind is predicted to be 160 at 10 knots, 2 statute miles, overcast 500. Well, maybe I won't come home tonight. That's going to be pretty close to my personal minimums for shooting the LPV approach here to Decatur. Same thing, don't rely on color codes. Actually read the lines. And again, Oklahoma City, as I predicted, it looks like it's IFR when I get there, but it should improve for a couple hours, and the ceiling should raise a little bit. Okay, let's look at winds aloft. Not much I can do about that. Going to have a nice little quartering tailwind on the way up and a quartering headwind on the way back. Let's go to departure NOTAMs. Now, all of the obstructions, if you stay on the obstacle departure or you stay on the standard instrument departure, any of these that affect the published ODP or published standard instrument departure would be NOTAM there as well. These are more important for VFR departures. It's not that I don't want you to be aware of them, but you just need to know the reason I only go IFR is because it's safer. Because if these obstructions affect an obstacle departure or standard instrument departure, it would stand out in a different NOTAM. Okay, there are lots of changes to the SIDS. We're not using any SIDS today. Let's look at destination NOTAMs. There's going to be a change to the ATIS phone number. There's going to be lots of obstructions, but again, if we stay on the standard terminal arrival routes and we stay on the instrument approach procedures, these would not affect us, and if they did, they would be NOTAM'd there. Now you're going to see a lot of changes to the departure or to the instrument approaches, and I've actually already made all of these notes. So let's look at the top one. Instrument approach, Will Rogers, the Oklahoma City, RNAV Yankee 17 left. The LNAV VNAV decision altitude is 1618. So RNAV Yankee 17 left, the LNAV VNAV DA is 1618. So if I go to my plates and I look up Oklahoma City and we look at the RNAV Yankee 17, right? Did I get the wrong one? Let's see here. Let's go back to flight. The RNAV Yankee 17 left. Thank you. Close. RNAV Yankee 17 left. And look, I missed one. The LNAV VNAV needs to be changed to 1618. That will also show up here in NOTAMs. So this one doesn't apply. This one does. LNAV VNAV 1618. So I need to make that change before I go on. And this is the beauty of ForeFlight. I can just mark up the charts. Let's look at the other NOTAMs. Okay. LNAV MDA is now 1740. So I need to do the same thing here. And the circling category is 1780. Now I read these quite a bit quicker just because I do them so often. But again, if you take your time, you'll notice them. So you mark them up before you go. All right, let's go back to flights. And there was that NOTAM. I'm going to go through the rest of the NOTAMs fairly quickly just for brevity on this webinar. You should take a lot more time in real life. Nav NOTAMs. Well, we know the buoy VOR is out of service. We know some ILSs at Redbird and DFW and Addison is out of service. The NDB in Lexington, Oklahoma is out of service. I can't tell you how upset I am over that. And there's a couple ILSs out at Norman and Oklahoma City. Let's look at COM NOTAMs. The RCO 122.3 at Dallas Love is unusable. Let's look at service NOTAMs. The AWOS at Ardmore Downtown Executive. Now we listed Ardmore KADM, not Ardmore Executive, as our alternate, so that doesn't affect us. There's something at Wiley Post, something at Clarence Page. Shepherd Approach is open during those times. And whenever you see KZFW, that's a Zenter. In other words, that's a Fort Worth Zenter NOTAM. Let's look at airspace NOTAMs. A lot of times you're going to see, I put it right there at the top, UAS, that's drones, unmanned aerial systems. A lot of people think, oh, that's Amazon. No, not necessarily. That could be a military drone. And some of these military drones, I have friends that fly them. Some of these military drones can hold a 9G turn at 200 plus knots. You don't really want to be near them. But again, if you stay IFR, they'll keep you clear of them. And you'll notice if we look at the very top, I've highlighted the very last line, they're typically kept pretty low, surface to 400 feet. So I'm going to go through here. And again, I've already read all these. Here's one surface to 200. Here's one surface to 400. I've already read them. The ones I'm really looking for is something that says PJE, Papa Juliet Echo. That's parachute jumping in effect. So that one concerns me. Again, if I fly IFR, they should keep me out of those areas, but those are the ones I really, really watch for. All right, so a bunch of drone stuff, bunch of drone stuff, bunch of drone stuff. And I've already read them all. Again, I'm doing this quickly for the webinar. En route taxiway NOTAMs. I'm really just looking for anything that affects KLUD, KADM, or KOKC. So I can scroll through here fairly quick. Again, I've done this briefing many times, but I'm really just looking for KLUD, KADM, Ardmore, that's our alternate, or KOKC. And this is going to show you anything within 50 miles of your route. So sometimes I have to scroll through here fairly quickly to find the ones that I want to find. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And I'm looking for one in particular, and there it is, right there at the top. So there's some changes to Ardmore procedures. Okay, so we need to mark those up since those are in our alternate airport. Now, I've already marked them up. But right there at the top one, taxiway Alpha between Alpha 1 and runway 13 is closed. So if I go to Ardmore, KADM, and I touch the star to make it a favorite, and then I touch the taxiway button, you'll notice I've already marked out that closed taxiway. Let's see what other NOTAMs have an effect. So that's the one I've closed, and there's one when in progress constructions adjacent to the southwest side. But you can see how I've already marked up the taxiway diagram. So one of the differences between a professional pilot and an amateur is a professional pilot spends more time on the ground than flying. The amateur is always the direct opposite. Let's go back to flights. All right, anything else? Nope. Military NOTAMs. Now, the only thing I'm really looking for on military NOTAMs is if there's a VOR based at a military field, or the military field nearest my destination, or en route if the PAR, the Precision Approach Radar, is out, because that's something I would use in an emergency. Most of the other stuff doesn't really apply to me. So I'm really just looking at Tinker, TIK, that's the one nearest Oklahoma. Don't care about closed taxiways, don't care about any of that. Okay, good to go. Let's talk about FDC NOTAMs. There is some chart corrections on the St. Louis VFR sectional, and I'll show you how to do that in a different video. But the triple Z is state security. So this is all the places you shouldn't go. Now this one is important right here. Fort Worth Center. Because some instrument approaches to Texas, U.S.-based airports, the instrument approach actually goes into Mexican territory. Now it's controlled by a U.S. air traffic controller. You don't need permission to cross the border to shoot an instrument approach, for example, Brownfield down in South Texas. But what they're saying is the terrain and obstacle data may not be accurate. Why? Well, a citizen of Mexico, another country, has no obligation to call the U.S. FAA and say, I built a ham radio station. I don't have to call Canada if I put up a radio tower in Texas. So all they're saying is the databases we're getting may not be 100% accurate, and you should be careful. There's the TFR that affects all security events, or sporting, Major League Baseball, National Football League, all that good stuff. Here's the stuff about drones. Here's the emergency order restricting Boeing 737 MAX systems right there. There's something about digital link communication that doesn't apply to most of you. Here's more stuff about drones, stuff about intercepting, and if you fly near the White House, how they're going to tell you before they start shooting. International NOTAMs is next. I'm going to skip the international NOTAMs. I'm going north from Dallas to Oklahoma City, which means if I end up in Mexico or Canada, I did something wrong. This is now my favorite thing that ForeFlight offers, a 3-day convective. I teach all over the world. I can be in Alaska one day, Pennsylvania 3 days later, and a week after that, I'll be training people in Australia. So because I travel primarily most of the U.S., this is my favorite thing. I'm not teaching today but the flight going north for practice and training on this video is going near Oklahoma, or it's going into Oklahoma, but you can see there's a slight risk of thunderstorms. What about flying tomorrow? And I need to go shoot some in-flight footage for my new Avidyne series, and I want to do that in a couple days, and it looks like that would be a good day to do it. So there's a very quick review of the standard weather briefing. Okay, so now that I've briefed, now I can file. You never want to file then brief, because how do you know your alternates will work and everything? So now that I've gotten a weather brief, I can go ahead and file. So we've got departing Decatur, going to Oklahoma City, alternate of Ardmore, leaving in just a little bit. I filed Fidget.Tisdale3 with, the Ranger 360 radial up to Blico. And there are 57 people watching this video right now. Oh, I guess we're going to have to leave some of you home. Apparently my 206 will not fly at any altitude with 57 people in it. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to leave most of you behind, and I'll just fly alone. That'll be fine. Okay, I always fly with full fuel, if possible. Everything else looks great. AAR is where I'm going. You'll notice the little email symbol is grayed out. I'm going to put that right at the top. If there it is blue, you can actually email the FBO a fuel request, and when you land, they're already waiting for you. I'm going to go ahead and hit proceed to file. Confirm that I'm ICAO, that all my equipment is set up correctly. Everything looks good. And this is where I can add a second alternate airport. So my first alternate airport, I always put before my destination, a minimum of 50 miles, because if the weather's bad at my destination, I just stop before I fly into bad weather. The second alternate airport I'm going to put something nearby in case Oklahoma City is actually closed because somebody geared up and blocked all 10 runways or whatever, in which case I'm going to put Wiley Post, which is KPWA. Okay. Everything else looks cool. I'm going to go ahead and file that. File now. It's going to file it. My flight plan's been filed. And fairly shortly, I should get an expected route and flight plan acknowledged. And guess what I got? My expected route was received, KLUD to Oklahoma City, exactly what I thought, Fuzz 360 radial to Blico. Now, remember, I'm not going to Fuzz. I'm going to intercept the Fuzz 360 radial to Blico. Don't ever hit update at this point, because if you update it, it will confuse the map, because there is no such thing as Fuzz 360. So since I already got what I planned on, I'm just going to hit cancel. And you'll notice down at the bottom right is an amend button. That amend button will go away 30 minutes before my estimated departure time. If I need to change the flight plan less than 30 minutes before I depart, I just have to file a second flight plan. And then when I call regional, I just tell them which flight plan. Which, by the way, how am I going to get out of here being a non-towered airport? Well, it's pretty simple. At almost every airport in the United States now, if you simply go to airports, pick your departure airport, which would be Decatur, touch frequencies, then touch clearance, there is a direct dial phone number to the TRACON or center where you can now call and get a telephone clearance after your run-up is done and you're literally number one ready to depart. So that's why I always depart IFR, because I'm going with a telephone clearance before I take off. Okay, so since we know that I'm never going to the Fuzz VOR, I'm going to be told to intercept the Fuzz 360 radial to obliquo, I need to activate that leg. So currently it's showing me going to Fuzz. Well, I'm never going to do that. So to activate the leg, I'm going to touch Navlog. I'm going to touch the arrow between Fuzz and obliquo, and I'm going to put fly leg. This is exactly how I do vectors to final later in the program. Now the other thing is I always want to overlay my emergency alternate, or what I call a takeoff alternate. Takeoff alternate is mostly used by the airlines, but it's something I learned many years ago. If I depart to the south of Decatur, it's probably easier to get into another airport quicker if I had an in-flight emergency. So since I'm going that way anyway, I'm going to overlay an emergency approach at Denton DTO. So if I have an emergency after takeoff, I'm going to divert to Denton. So I'm going to touch Denton Airport with my finger. I'm going to touch More next to the airport. I'm then going to touch Details. I'm going to scroll up from the bottom until I find Approach. And then I'm going to overlay the ILS 18 on top. The reason I would do an ILS, GPS is always better in my opinion, but what if I lose GPS signal right after takeoff? Well, I'd want to land at the nearest airport. I couldn't come back to Decatur because we don't have anything but GPS. Another good reason to use a takeoff alternate. So I'm going to touch Map next to ILS or Localizer 18. And as I depart, you'll notice I've already got that plate marked up. So the question is it legal to use ForeFlight only as your primary method of navigation on an instrument approach? When I say Mayday, 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 I can do anything I want. And having this on ForeFlight, all I have to do is disconnect my autopilot, hand fly towards that localizer, and then very quickly load it on my Avidyne. But this will get me to the ground quickly and safely. Remember, ForeFlight is absolutely legal in an emergency, which this would be. So if I needed to activate that quickly, I could certainly do so by simply changing it. But just overlaying the plate tells me everything I need to know. Okay, so we've talked about flight planning, we've talked about departures. What if you're just innocently flying along and Regional or Fort Worth Center or whoever you happen to be talking to assigns you a custom en route hold? Well, you need to know how to put it in your flight management system, Avidyne, Bendix King, of course, your flight management systems, or your GPS system like Garmin. You need to know how to do all that. But after you program your navigation system and after you've set your autopilot to do it, what if you'd like to add situational awareness just to ForeFlight? Well, pretty easy to do. GPS holds are typically 4 nautical miles. VOR-based holds are typically 1 minute. Remember, if they don't assign you a turn direction, it's always the right answer to turn right. But let's say we're coming up on Muddy and we're heading southbound. I know it looks north, but we're track up. We're heading southbound and Fort Worth Center says, advise ready to copy. I need to hold you at Muddy for 10 minutes. Okay, I'm ready to copy. Well, the instructions are hold west of Muddy, 4 nautical mile legs, left turns. So if I'm holding west of Muddy, that would be on the 270 radial, would be my inbound course. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to custom content and create a custom user waypoint. I'm going to touch the plus button at the top right, and we'll call it Muddy West, or MUDDW. My latitude is just a custom distance and radial off Muddy. So it'd be Muddy /270, then a /, then 4. That draws a custom waypoint 4 miles west of Muddy, and that's my inbound course. I'm just going to grab that blue line where the red mark is, drag it to waypoints, my new custom waypoint. Then I'm going to grab the blue line and drag it back to Muddy. And look, I've just put in a custom en route hold. So let's see what flying it looks like. Well, there's my custom en route hold. And gee, as much as I hate it, it looks like this one is definitely going to be a parallel entry. So I'm going to, of course, this is already programmed into my Avidyne flight management system. My STEC 55X autopilot, the Genesis system, is going to fly it. And let's see what it looks like in real life. And this is the biggest distinction between my training videos, by the way, and others. This is not theory. This is all real in-flight footage that you're seeing. Do you see how it cuts the corner? That's what GPS roll steering is. A lot of people say GPS-S, GPS guided steering. It's actually GPS-RS. There's an invisible R, and it allows you to roll before the waypoint, and it's a more stabilized way of flying. And you can see ForeFlight has activated the leg out to Muddy West. So, yep, it looks like Avidyne and Genesis agree this is going to be a parallel entry. For brevity on today's video, I'm just going to show you that, yes, it did a parallel entry and is now turning back. Now, the problem is once I get close to Muddy, ForeFlight's going to try and auto-sequence southbound and continue my flight plan. So I need to stop it after it auto-sequences and tell it to redo that inbound line. So as we get close to Muddy, you'll notice it auto-sequences the line going to the right, that's southbound, and it will turn that magenta, or Gary's pink source, and will activate the lug between Muddy and Font. So by going to Navlog early, when that happens, I can scroll back up and reactivate the Muddy West to Muddy leg and keep it in the hold. Again, for brevity's sake, I'm just going to show you that now I've completed my first turn in the hold. Remember, your entry does not count as a turn. And they say, after passing Muddy, own navigation, meaning resume your normal flight plan. In this case, I want to let the auto sequence happen. So I will. When I get close, it'll start rolling out because I've exited the hold on the Avidyne. And as soon as ForeFlight realizes I'm going, we'll then auto sequence and go Gary Pink. And my track log will continue down to Font. So that's how you add a custom hold. So a review from the beginning. You're flying along, you've got the star in there. How do you actually show the plate? Well, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is touch KOKC at the top and put Show Plate. Now, what confuses people are the SIDS and stars are all lumped together by alphabetical. So they're not split. So just go to Tisdale alphabetical. And that's the advantage of having a Jeppesen plate. You can see where the boundary of the plate is. Now you can only overlay Jeppesen plates. It's another reason I pay extra to have Jeppesen plates. Actually, I get Jeppesen plates on ForeFlight for free because I have Jeppesen plates on my Avidyne. But they are drawn to scale for SIDS and stars, whereas government plates are not. And again, you can see that. Now I've got the star all overlaid, which is nice. What about now adding an instrument approach to that? Well, that's pretty simple. All I have to do is touch the procedure button in the top right. Pick the approach I want, and in this case, I'm going to do the ILS 17 right, starting at Philem. And you notice it automatically loads the procedure turn at Philem, because a procedure turn is always legally required to add an initial approach fix unless they save vectors to final or tell you to go straight in. That's the distinction between an intermediate fix and an initial approach fix, which is covered in my IFR series. Now that dashed blue line that it changes to, that is the manual termination. That is the radar vector that we talked about earlier, because they don't know when Oklahoma City Approach is going to say direct fill them. They don't know if they're going to say fly this heading vectors to final. Now, I never want you to activate vectors to final on a GPS system like Garmin, an advanced flight management system like Avidyne, or a really good situational awareness tool like ForeFlight. I want you to always load the full approach and activate the leg to final, which is the same thing but keeps all the other waypoints in place and maintains the integrity of the flight plan in case somebody changes their mind. So before we get there, we need to add the missed approach point, which ForeFlight doesn't do yet. So I'm going to manually add the missed approach point. And if you look, the missed approach says climb to this, then a climbing right turn to 3000 to intercept a radial off the Wiley post, the PWA VOR, and hold at jet ski. So let me show you how to manually add that. I simply put the cursor after OKC at top under the edit. And I'm going to type in PWA space jet ski. Well, that's pretty close, except we're not supposed to go to Wiley Post. We're just supposed to intercept that radial. So you see where I put the red line? I'm going to grab that waypoint and move it to the intercept point. And then I'm going to grab here and drag it to closer match the curve. And booyah, I've now drawn in the missed approach point. Again, situational awareness only, but that's going to be pretty close. So let's say we are coming up and we're on the arrival and they say, would you like vectors to final? Well, yes, I pay for my own gas. I always want vectors to final. So how do I activate the leg to final on ForeFlight? I don't want to activate vectors to final because it deletes all the other waypoints. I just want to activate the leg to final. And the final is marked by a giant pink T called a VHI. So let me show you how to do that. I'm just going to touch Navlog, find the leg to a VHI. A VHI will be on the right side. There's the procedure turn, all those H things. There's the leg from Roja to VHI. I'm going to touch the arrow in the middle and fly leg. And by the way, that's the exact same way you do it on a Garmin GPS or an Avidyne or Bendix King advanced FMS system. That's the exact same steps. You always activate the leg to the end of the leg, in this case, a VHI. So let's show you what it actually looks like in real life flying. I've been vectored north, and now I'm just going to fly towards it. They're going to say intercept, fly this heading, intercept the localizer, and I'll do that. Now for the brevity of this short video, I'm going to skip ahead. We've already flown the approach and show you what it looks like when you're flying the mist. So you can see I've already turned right, I'm climbing, and I'm flying the mist. I'm not exactly on the pink leg because that 311 dashed line on the mist approach on the Jeppesen plate, yes, it's drawn to scale, it's geo-referenced, but they don't know your climb performance. They don't know exactly where you're going to turn. It's just situational awareness. But let me show you how cool ForeFlight is. It will auto-sequence once I turn left and head southwest bound on that 216 radial, and I pass the custom waypoint I put in. So let me show you what it looks like. And this is real time. This is not simulator. This is what it looks like in a real moving airplane. Sorry, I don't have a faster airplane, folks. You can send donations to buy my Turbo 210. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so here we go. As we turn, And when I say I'm kidding, I mean I still want your donations, but I would prefer a Malibu jet prop. Okay, so now watch what happens as I take my 1966 very cool but slightly slow 206 past that custom waypoint. You'll notice it now auto sequences to Gary Pink. And ta-da, I'm out flying the mist. All right, now I'm entering the hold. I've entered the hold and it looks like a parallel entry. Not my choice, but let the Genesis autopilot do whatever it wants to do, right? Now I want to change the instrument procedure to the RNAV 1.3. So let me show you how to figure out how to do that. I don't want to reprogram my navigation system. I don't want to reprogram my Avidyne. I don't want to reprogram a Garmin just yet. What I want to do is use ForeFlight as the tool it's designed to be and decide what new procedure I want and where I want to start it before I program my in-flight navigation system. This is why I want everybody to use ForeFlight. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch the sheriff's badge and change it to the RNAV 1.3. And then I'm going to zoom in and decide where I'd want to start. Now, really, I'd want to start at Laramie. But for training purposes, I'm going to make my student fly all the way up to the top where it says Yavki. So I'm just going to add that to the end of the flight plan. Whoops, Yavki, not Yukfi. Then hit return. So again, Laramie would be a better option, but for training purposes, I want my student to go up to Yavki. So then I make the request with Oklahoma City, Oak City, Station Air 4941 Foxtrot request. What do you want? I'd like to do the RNAV 1.3, publish, missed, and hold, starting at Yavki with ATIS X-ray. And they're going to say, okay, when able, direct Yavki. Okay, well then I'm going to program my Avidyne to do all that. And that's in my, of course, Avidyne series. Or if you have a Garmin, that would be in my Garmin video series. But now I want to show you how to catch up. So you use ForeFlight to plan what procedure you want, but making in-flight navigation, you always use your navigators first and then use ForeFlight to catch up. So ForeFlight first for planning. Navigation first happens with your in-panel navigation system. So all I'm going to do is I'm simply just going to touch where it says procedure and change it to the RNAV 1.3 now. Starting at Laramie, or I'm sorry, Yavki. And what's interesting is an initial approach fix always requires a procedure turn. I'm going to clean up my flight plan a little bit and then go direct to, so it catches up with what my autopilot and my navigation system is doing. And then I'm just going to clean up the missed approach a little bit as well. Going to grab right there where I put the red dot and just drag it to match the curve. Good. So remember, if you've watched my IFR Mastery series, an intermediate fix prohibits a procedure turn, and an initial approach fix requires you to always do the procedure turn. So why didn't ForeFlight add that procedure turn at Yavki? Because it's not a procedure turn. I know it looks like one, but there is no published procedure turn for Yavki. That's actually an en route hold. All procedure turns, what we call a course reversal, it's never a hold. It's a holding pattern in lieu of a procedure turn. You're not supposed to hold there. It's a one and done. Again, watch my IFR Mastery series. But that's actually not a procedure turn or course reversal. That's just a custom en route hold, or a defined en route hold for ATC purposes. How do I know it's not a procedure turn? It looks like a procedure turn because procedure turns are flyable courses, just like the one coming from Hawks, Kingfisher, Terse, or Laramie. And all flyable courses have to be a bold line, not the thin line shown in that hold. And they must have three things on the inbound course. A magnetic reference bearing, look at Terse. The magnetic reference bearing from Terse to Wabbit is 186. There's a distance of 5.3, and I have to be at or above 4,000. If you look at the inbound leg in that hold, there's a 131, but there's no distance on the inbound leg, and it's not bold. The distance is on the outbound leg, and it's a thin line. So that is one of my favorite teaching moments. That is not a procedure turn. That's why ForeFlight won't add it, and that's why Avidyne, Bendix King, and Garmin won't add it if you start the procedure at YevKey. All right, so let's see what a missed approach looks like on an RNAV 1.3. I showed you the missed approach on an ILS. The RNAV 1.3 is an LP plus V. It's not LPV. It's an LP plus V, which means instead of going to a decision altitude, you level off, and at this case, I leveled off at 1,800 feet. And I'm going to show you what it looks like to stay level, then go missed. Now, again, my video training series is based on real life in-flight footage. So when you notice ForeFlight looks a little jerky, you'll notice my GPS altitude and my GPS ground speed varying greatly. It's because the winds during this approach were from 19 true at 49 knots. It was absolutely moderate turbulence. We experienced low-level wind shear. This is the kind of things you learn when you go through my 3-day mastery program. But I want to show you what it looks like on ForeFlight. So we're flying along, and you'll notice my heading in the Aspen.
500.
Remember, 500 AGL has nothing to do with approach minimums. It's an above ground level, and it's GPS, not driven from an altimeter. So my heading for most of this approach was 154, but you notice ForeFlight thinks I'm flying 130. Remember, air traffic control and GPS does not know where your nose is pointed. It's simply tracking a ground track. That's why sometimes ATC will ask what you're heading, because they don't know where your nose is pointed. That's why sometimes they'll tell you to turn left 10 degrees and then turn another left. Now, I absolutely have leveled off at 1,800. The GPS altitude is going up and down because of wind shear and turbulence. That's another good reason to round up and add 100 to all the published minimums. As soon as I pass over that number 13, that's the missed approach point, I've now gone full power and am climbing. But you notice it's not quite climbing there for a second, even though I'm full power nose up. That is low-level wind shear. I truly am trying to pitch up, and I'll get a big gain in vertical speed once I turn more into the wind. Now it thinks I'm climbing. So I've shown you an ILS mist. I've shown you an LP plus V mist. What if I showed you an LP mist? Now, LP has no vertical guidance. It's literally just a step down, no different than a localizer approach. So this is going to be an LP, circle to land, same winds. We've diverted to our alternate of Ardmore. And I'm descending to at or above 1,800 feet. Now you notice the ForeFlight course is not accurate to what I'm flying. That's because this is our second attempt at this same approach, and I was so busy teaching that I didn't tell ForeFlight to catch up. But I'm just tracking the blue line. Remember, ForeFlight, grade aid to situational awareness, but not a priority when you're busy flying an airplane. So that's why the course needle's not showing what it should, and my active leg is not magenta. But it's a grade aid to situational awareness. All right, now after passing CRSWT, I have no idea how to say that, Corswit, I don't know, whatever. After we pass that, I'm going to descend to at or above 1,400, level off, and look for an airport.
3 mile final runway 13.
Where Corswit is. You see it says 3 nautical miles to runway 13. We start our descent. pretty bumpy. Now, I am circling the land. I don't want anybody to think I'm a hypocrite. Thank you.
500,
I really am against circle to land. I would never do a circling approach at night or an actual IMC. Low and slow and poor visibility is not something that works out well for people. If I can't land straight in IMC or night, I'm just going to go to my alternate. I am circling to land during the training event because I want to do it on his IPC, but it is day VMC. Even though it's bumpy, even there's a little low level wind shear, it is day visibility, and that's the only reason I'm circling to land. It's not illegal to do a circle to land at night, but it has a much higher fatality rate than straight in approaches. And look at those obstacles I'm going over. So am I safe over those obstacles? Well, I am because I can see them. But remember, yellow terrain and yellow obstacles only guarantees you're 100 feet above them. That's not safe with moderate turbulence and low level wind shear. And watch what happens when I turn to line up on runway 13. Just because the wind pushes that wing down. Watch my vertical speed as I turn. See how being 100 feet above an obstacle is not really great on night IMC, right? This is why I don't do circling approaches at night or actually IMC. All right, and you can see I'm not lined up with the runway according to the GPS. Well, I have to offset for the wind, and then it'll line up based on ground track. So at this point, I've called for my controls, and I'm going to do the crosswind landing. Not that my student couldn't do it. He just normally doesn't fly at 206. You notice I'm staying pretty high. The ground speed is not what my airspeed indicator. My airspeed indicator is still pegged at 80. I'm coming in a little high and a little fast. You'll know when I reduce the power. Watch my ground speed. That's when I've reduced the power. Fairly close to center line, certainly not my worst landing. And as soon as I have touched down and slowed down, ForeFlight will now change instantly to a taxiway diagram.